Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. On tonight's headlines. The World Health Organization said the world should be able to rein in the coronavirus pandemic in less than 2 years. An air ambulance took off from the Siberian city of Omsk, carrying Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny to Germany for treatment of a suspected poisoning after a day-long standoff over his medical evacuation. The defending champions Toronto Raptors pummeled the Brooklyn Nets, while the Boston Celtics had to claw past a determined Philadelphia on Friday, both taking commanding 3-0 series leads in the NBA playoffs. And the humble manhole cover might not seem like much of a blank canvas, but one Japanese city is reimagining the possibilities with illuminated versions featuring anime characters. First, the World Health Organization said the world should be able to rein in the coronavirus pandemic in less than 2 years. WHO's chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus drew comparisons between the COVID-19 pandemic and the 1918 flu pandemic, saying technology could help end the spread. Take a look.
Advantage of globalization, closeness, connectedness, but an advantage of better technology. So we hope to finish this pandemic before less than 2 years, especially if we can pull our efforts together and with national unity, global solidarity. That's really key, with utilizing the available tools to the maximum and hoping that we can have additional tools like vaccine. I think we can finish it in a shorter time than the 1918 flu.
The pandemic has killed at least 793,847 people worldwide since surfacing in China late last year, according to a tally from the Johns Hopkins University. More than 22.7 million cases have been registered in 196 countries and territories. The U.S. has recorded the most deaths with 175,409, according to Johns Hopkins, followed by Brazil with 113,358, Mexico with 59,610, India 55,794, and Britain with 41,491. The 1918 influenza pandemic, known as the Spanish flu, lasted for 2 years and infected 500 million people worldwide and killed an estimated 20 million to 50 million victims. That's more than all of the soldiers and civilians killed during World War I combined. The WHO also recommended that children over 12 years old now use masks in the same situations as adults, as the use of face coverings increases to stop the virus spread. With no usable vaccine yet available, the most prominent tool governments have at their disposal is to confine their populations or enforce social distancing. Take a look.
But it's also very important when we talk about the context of schools or the wearing of masks in schools, and as that guidance emerges, that the wearing of masks is not an alternative to physical distancing. It's not an alternative to hand washing. It's not an alternative to decompressing class sizes. It's not an alternative to all of the other measures. Just because kids or others put masks on does not mean we can forget about the other measures. This virus is not displaying similar wave-like pattern. Clearly, when the disease is not under control, it jumps straight back up. But from that perspective, the classic wave pattern of the 1918-1919 pandemic was very clear. But it did take 3 complete waves for that disease to spread around the world and infect most susceptibles.
Based on those findings, as well as considerations surrounding children's development needs, they said the advice varied in different age groups. The document acknowledged that much remains unknown about to what degree children contribute to the spread of the coronavirus. But it said that while there is some limited evidence that young children may have lower susceptibility to infection compared to adults, data indicated that teenagers may play a more active role in transmission than younger children, according to the new guidance for children of any age with developmental disorders. Meanwhile, disabilities or other specific health conditions that might interfere with mask wearing, the use of masks should not be mandatory. It also recommends that children should not be asked to wear masks when playing sports or doing physical activities so that it doesn't compromise their breathing, but stresses the importance of keeping a proper distance from others and limiting the number of children playing together. Meanwhile, South Korea has announced it will ramp up coronavirus restrictions across the country starting Sunday to try and control a growing outbreak. Take a look. The move came as South Korea, which had largely brought its earlier outbreak under control, reported 332 cases on Saturday, the highest daily figure since early March. Virus curbs were tightened in the Seoul region last week, but with more than 300 cases reported 2 days in a row, authorities expanded them to the rest of the country. And Australia's virus-hit Victoria State reports continued decrease of the coronavirus cases, but officials are warning against complacency amid a worrying spread of the disease in other areas outside Melbourne. Take a look.
Issues here. With 100 new cases overnight, again a very good result from Victoria, 182 cases, sadly 13 deaths and 10 of those associated with aged care in Victoria. And so, as I do every time, I'd send my condolences and best wishes to the families and friends of those who have passed away in this terrible pandemic. But very good news from Victoria, really. A decrease also in hospitalisations and in intensive care and those on ventilators. I think we need to be very clear that we will have an increase in deaths over time. The numbers of deaths will lag behind the decreasing numbers in cases. So 13 deaths overnight, again, sad news from Victoria. In New South Wales, again, good news. We have under 10 cases again in New South Wales, 9 cases overnight. Almost all of those linked with known outbreaks. In Queensland today, less good news. That case that was announced yesterday related to a detention facility in Brisbane has now, with the testing around that case, very rapid response, as is usual in Queensland, to the public health issue. I think I just want to really reiterate about our strategy that we have for COVID-19, our suppression strategy. It relies on 4 elements. And so those 4 elements are our strong external border strategy. And we've had that from the beginning in terms of limiting the number of people coming into Australia and potentially therefore bringing the virus in from overseas. And we've seen that restriction in people arriving and the strict 14 days quarantine in hotels be a very successful component of our strategy. And that's continuing.
Europe can combat the coronavirus without full lockdowns now that authorities are better prepared and have gained knowledge about how to fight it in recent months. That is according to the World Health Organization's regional director for Europe, telling a remote press conference in Copenhagen. Take a look.
But we are not in February. We can manage the virus differently now than we did when COVID-19 first emerged. With the basic nationwide and additional targeted measures, we are in a much better position to stamp out these localized virus flare-ups. We can manage the virus and keep the economy running and an education system in operation.
In addition to calling for good hand hygiene, social distancing measures, and national testing and tracing programs, the WHO recommended that additional measures be adopted locally when clusters arise. On average, 26,000 new cases are being reported every day in Europe, according to the WHO. Young people who tend to experience milder symptoms and lower mortality rates account for a growing share of cases. However, Mr. Klug stressed the importance of reopening schools as countries gradually return to normal, noting the negative consequences that school closures have had on children. The WHO's European region, which covers 55 countries, has registered almost 4 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 and 215,000 deaths linked to the virus, according to the organization. And record high temperatures and extreme heat wave has killed dozens of people in Japan. Joining us live from Japan is Dennis Lu. Hello, Dennis.
Hello, Alma. Good evening
Good
to
evening.
you and to all our televiewers. The Tokyo Metropolitan Government says 256 people were confirmed infected with the coronavirus on Saturday. It is the third day in a row that the daily total of infections has surpassed 200. The officials are requesting people to refrain from traveling outside Tokyo or going to their hometowns. They are also urging people to avoid taking part in group dinners. Japanese government is planning to ease the strict re-entry ban that has been in place to curb the spread of the coronavirus. So the government is planning to allow the re-entry of all residential status holders on the condition that they take PCR virus tests and quarantine themselves for 2 weeks at designated hotels. The measures are similar to those currently taken for Japanese travelers. About 2.6 million foreigners hold resident status in Japan. Officials are preparing to expand the testing capabilities at Narita and 2 other major airports to 10,000 people per day next month to meet the demand. The government is currently denying entry to foreigners from 146 countries and territories. Alma?
All right, thank you very much. What about the heat wave? Yes, I mentioned about the heat wave. Sorry about that. How
Yes,
are you
Alma.
guys? Yes, go ahead.
Earlier this month, over 6,000 people were sent to the hospital due to heat stroke or heat exhaustion. This is according to the Japan Times. On Monday, August 17th, the Japan Meteorological Agency, or JMA, said that temperatures rose to 41.1 degrees Celsius or 105.9 degrees Fahrenheit in the central city of Hamamatsu in the Shizuoka Prefecture. The temperature in Tokyo reached 36.5 degrees Celsius or 97.7 degrees Fahrenheit on August 18th after 3 consecutive days of extreme heat. The mercury also soared above 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit in other parts of the country. And a lot of people found it difficult to face the rising temperature here, Alma, due to masks worn to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. So the extreme summer heat in Japan has killed 79 people in the capital of Tokyo so far. Alma?
All right. Thank you very much. You take care, Dennis. Thank you for your updates there in Japan.
You too, Alma. Thank you very much. Reporting live from Tokyo, Japan, this is Dennis Lu. We live in interesting times.
Thank you. All right, Singapore will allow travelers from Brunei and New Zealand to visit starting in September in a small, cautious step by the virus-hit aviation hub to restart air travel, according to officials on Friday. Now, the city-state closed its borders in March to tourists and short-term visitors and later implemented a partial lockdown as coronavirus outbreaks swept through dormitories housing hundreds of thousands of migrant workers. Arrivals from Brunei and New Zealand will be subject to a virus test in lieu of a 14-day quarantine. Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung said the move aims to strike a balance between controlling the spread of the virus and reviving air travel, a key driver of the trade and tourism reliant economy. To Thailand now, where the country has extended its state of emergency. Joining us live from Bangkok is Gila Pablo. Hello, Gila.
Yes, good evening, Alma, and good evening to all the viewers. Here's the latest update here in Bangkok, Thailand. So the CCSA, under the chairmanship of Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, decided to extend the emergency decree today for the sixth time until the end of September, as proposed by the National Security Council in order to continue to control the spread of COVID-19. The existing state of emergency is due to expire on August 31st. Meanwhile, Alma, the Deputy Prime Minister and the Public Health Minister, Anutin Chanvirakul, said that the CCSA has not considered a proposal to extend the opening hours of night entertainment venues to 2 a.m. instead of midnight, or a proposal for cinemas and sports stadia to drop social distancing in their premises. He also added that the Public Health Ministry is waiting for a letter from the Department of Treaties and Legal Affairs of the Foreign Ministry to be sent to UK's Oxford University about the collaboration in vaccine trials in Thailand. Thailand also recorded one new COVID-19 case today among the quarantine after recently returning from abroad. According to CCSA spokesman Dr. Tawisin Vitsanuyuddin, the new case is a 56-year-old Thai office worker employed in Singapore who arrived in Thailand on August 7th on the same flight as 3 other passengers who were later found to be infected with the coronavirus. The man entered the state quarantine in Chonburi province and tested positive in a second test conducted on August 18th. Dr. Tawisin disclosed that since 20th of July, Thailand recorded an average of 30 new cases per week, and most of them were asymptomatic. Although the Thai people in general are familiar with these figures, he said the Prime Minister wants the public to realize the importance of the figures because they show the efficiency of Thailand's effort to control the spread of the infection. The accumulated infections in Thailand to date are 3,390 with 3,219 recoveries and 58 deaths. There are still 113 others in the hospital. Globally, Thailand now ranks 115th in terms of total infections. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you very much, Gila, for your time. Thank you for joining us tonight. Stay safe.
Thank you, Alma. Thank you, and stay safe also. I'm Gila Pablo reporting live from Bangkok, Thailand. We live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, Vietnam is asking Malaysia to treat fishermen humanely after a sailor was killed. The Malaysian Coast Guard shot dead a Vietnamese fisherman whose boat tried to ram a patrol vessel in the South China Sea. Now, this incident took place inside Malaysian waters where local fishermen have complained in the past about Vietnamese fishing boats that damage their nets. Bringing us an update is Ralph Wandolph Empire. Hello, Ralph.
Pleasant evening. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Alma. Vietnam on Thursday asked Malaysia to ensure humane treatment for detained Vietnamese fishermen, following reports that one fisherman died at the hands of Malaysian law enforcement on August 16. Let T. Tu Hang, a spokesperson for the Vietnam Ministry of Foreign Affairs, made remarks during a press briefing in Hanoi, informing the press that 2 fishing vessels along with 18 fishermen were detained in the incident. The Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency said its Coast Guard shot a Vietnamese sailor dead after a confrontation over alleged encroachment in Malaysian waters in the South China Sea. The Foreign Ministry has exchanged diplomatic note with the Malaysian Embassy in Vietnam expressing its concerns on August 18. Han said in a statement that the Vietnamese Consular Department has asked Malaysian authorities to investigate and clarify the case, levy strict punishment on the public service personnel who caused the death of the Vietnamese fishermen, and to make sure not to repeat this action in future. Vietnam asked Malaysia to ensure humane treatment for the fishermen on the 2 seized boats, handle issues related to Vietnamese fishermen and fishing vessels in the spirit of humanism, friendship, and international law, especially given the 2 countries the strategic partnership and both being members of the ASEAN community, Han said. The Vietnamese Foreign Ministry has instructed the Vietnamese embassy in Malaysia to work with the Malaysian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and requested Malaysian authorities provide detailed information regarding the incident and facilitate Vietnamese consular visits to the detained citizens to see about their conditions and seek their side of the story, including circumstances surrounding the death, the Vietnamese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said. The Foreign Ministry will inform the press once the visits are allowed, she added. Now, while in other news, Prime Minister Nguyen Xuan Phuc has ordered the medical sector to create a national-scale healthcare system in response to a scenario with an increasing number of critically ill COVID-19 patients. Chairing the government's meeting on COVID-19 prevention and control on Friday, which was yesterday, he urged the healthcare sector to improve testing capacity for patients showing light symptoms such as coughing, fever, and shortness of breath. At the same time, the sector must focus on protecting the health of people in high-risk groups, especially those with underlying medical conditions and the elderly. He highlighted the dual target of pandemic prevention and control, along with developing socioeconomic and ordered local authorities and sectors not to stay complacent and make all-out efforts to curb the community transmission of COVID-19. He praised localities for their creative response to the second outbreak, including the establishment of a health ministry task force working in Da Nang and the mobilization of hundreds of medical workers for the central region. New technologies have been applied to trace infected persons and people in close contact with them. Acting Minister of Health Nguyen Thanh Long said the outbreak in Da Nang City, Quang Nam, and Hai Duong provinces had been controlled. There will be new cases in the community in some localities in the coming days, and more fatalities are predicted. Prime Minister Phuc asked local authorities and the Minister of Education and Training to hold discussions and submit a plan for organizing the second period of the national high school exam in areas which had lockdowns lifted. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you, Ralph, for your updates there in Vietnam. Thank you, EBC Vietnam Bureau.
You're welcome, Alma. This is Ralph Randolph F5 bringing you the latest updates here in Vietnam. We live in interesting times.
All right, and now here's Hawaii correspondent Alfred Asenas on the latest on the COVID-19 crisis in some parts of the Pacific region. Alfred.
So Luleon Guerrero is showing positive signs of a steady recovery from COVID-19 that she has been fighting off for almost a week now. But she still has that heavy burden as Guam's governor to deliver the not-so-good news about the latest surge of cases in the West Pacific Territory.
Tonight, the Department of Public Health and Social Services will confirm 105 new cases of COVID-19. This, by far, represents the largest number of confirmed cases in a day since the start of this pandemic. 28% of our total confirmed cases were recorded these past couple of weeks alone. Along with this significant increase in confirmed cases, this most recent tragedy indicates that we cannot decrease our vigilance. We cannot become comfortable, and we cannot surrender to complacency. We are not invincible. No matter how young, healthy, and active you are still at risk, and you are putting others at risk too. I must remind the public that this pandemic will either accelerate beyond the capacity of our healthcare system or decrease to containable levels. We are dangerously close to the former. To prevent this from becoming our future, even stronger measures need to be taken. This is why, effective noon tomorrow, August 21st, through an executive order, all businesses will be closed, with the exception of grocery stores, healthcare operations, including pharmacies, gas stations, convenience stores, hardware stores, and those operations critical to health, shelter, and the preservation of life. It is my hope that this escalation will last only a week, just long enough to flatten our rising curve. To assuage any fears you may have because of this order, I will be establishing a hotline that will answer your questions, which we will announce tomorrow. In any long struggle, there are good days and there are bad. Today is not easy. While there may be a vocal minority advocating against these measures, I know the people of Guam are not prepared to even greater risk. Based on what we know about COVID-19, to prevent the collapse of our healthcare system, we need to take drastic steps, and we need to take them immediately. I know this is extremely difficult, but the good of all depends on the sacrifices of many.
Meanwhile, here on the island of Oahu, Honolulu Mayor Kirk Caldwell expressed some optimism given the latest numbers of COVID-19 cases, though they're still in triple digits, are actually trending downward in the past week. In fact, he tweeted, "We're glad to see that the exponential growth in case numbers seems to have tapered off, but we've had over 1,000 new cases of COVID-19 this week. People can spread the virus before they even know they have it. So the only sure way to slow it down is to avoid gathering." And to recall, earlier this week, the governor has approved the recommendation by Mayor Caldwell to restrict all gatherings to no more than 5 people for the next 28 days, whether indoor or outdoor. That includes parties no larger than 5 people, face covering required in malls, no groups larger than 5 at restaurants, which are still open, by the way, and no social gatherings at business establishments, just to name a few. Now, and also parks, beaches, and trails remain closed for the next 28 days. That took effect last Thursday. And to cap off this week here in the Pacific, a sign of hope of just how people across the board are striving to achieve going back to normal. Here's a picture of the latest from RIMPAC 2020, the Rim of the Pacific exercise off the waters in these islands. This is the formation or fleet of the latest fleet of vessels, all 22 of them pretty much in a formation as they almost wrap up their first week of RIMPAC, which will end August 31. And just to demonstrate that people across the board are trying to work together even in these unprecedented challenges. Reporting from Honolulu, Hawaii, I'm Alfred Asenas, Eagle News. We live in interesting times. Back to you.
Thank you, Alfred. Now, Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden promised to end the darkness of Donald Trump's presidency in a speech accepting the Democratic nomination with an impassioned call for unity and a return to optimism. Meanwhile, President Trump and the Republicans are preparing for their turn next week. Let's listen in.
The current president has cloaked American darkness for much too long. Too much anger, too much fear, too much division. Here and now, I give you my word. If you entrust me with the presidency, I will draw on the best of us, not the worst. I'll be an ally of the light, not the darkness.
Biden lambasted President Trump's pandemic response. Take a look.
We lead the world in confirmed cases. We lead the world in deaths. Our economy is in tatters. And after all this time, the president still does not have a plan. Well, I do.
Now, Joe Biden also said he knew he had to run for president after hearing President Trump say this during the 2017 white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. Take a look.
Just a week ago yesterday was the 3rd anniversary of the events in Charlottesville. Close your eyes. Remember what you saw on television. Remember seeing those neo-Nazis and Klansmen and white supremacists coming out of fields with lighted torches, veins bulging, spewing the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. And remember what the president said when asked? He said there were, quote, very fine people on both sides. At that moment, I knew I'd have to run. My father taught us that silence was complicity. I could never remain silent or complicit. At the time, I said we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. And we are.
Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton attacked Donald Trump as a failure on the third night of the all-online Democratic Convention. Even Michelle Obama echoed the same sentiments. Take a look.
And don't forget, Joe and Kamala can win by 3 million votes and still lose. Take it from me. So we need numbers overwhelming so Trump can't sneak or steal his way to victory. Remember back in 2016 when Trump asked, "What do you have to lose?" Well, now we know. Our health care, our jobs, our loved ones, our leadership in the world, and even our post office. As Michelle Obama and Bernie Sanders warned us, if Trump is reelected, things will get even worse.
Donald Trump hasn't grown into the job because he can't. And the consequences of that failure are severe. 170,000 Americans dead. Millions of jobs gone, while those at the top taken more than ever. Our worst impulses unleashed, our proud reputation around the world badly diminished.
So let me be as honest and clear as I possibly can. Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country. He has had more than enough time to prove that he can do the job, but he is clearly in over his head. He cannot meet this moment. He simply cannot be who we need him to be for us. It is what it is.
Now, over the week, Senator Kamala Harris made history when she accepted the Democratic nomination for vice president, the first woman of color ever nominated to the job. She joined Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton in condemning President Trump's profound failure as a leader.
Donald Trump's failure of leadership has cost lives and livelihoods. So make no mistake, the road ahead is not easy. We may stumble. We may fall short. But I pledge to you that we will act boldly and deal with our challenges honestly. We will speak truths, and we will act with the same faith in you that we ask you to place in us.
We need the world to feel better. I'm just a regular kid, and in a short amount of time, Joe Biden
A diverse slate of everyday Americans went online to support Joe Biden. Even 13-year-old Braden Harrington, who credited Biden to control his stutter. Even his previous presidential rivals banded together in unity. Even Republicans who backed their own party to now back Biden. The DNC ended with fireworks as Joe Biden exits the Chase Center in Wilmington, Delaware, where he accepted the Democratic Party's nomination for U.S. president. But there are more fireworks ahead as President Trump started his rebuttal of Joe Biden at an event in Washington, D.C. U.S. President Donald Trump said the Democrats held the darkest and angriest and gloomiest convention in American history, a day after Joe Biden officially accepted the party nomination.
But over the last week, the Democrats held the darkest and angriest and gloomiest convention in American history. They spent 4 straight days attacking America as racist and a horrible country that must be redeemed. They want to punish America and its citizens instead of holding them high. Where Joe Biden sees American darkness, I see American greatness. We've seen heroic doctors and nurses racing into action to save lives. China was never mentioned in any way, shape, or form. China will own our country if he gets elected. They will own our country. We're not going to let that happen. And you've seen the intelligence reports. China very much wants Joe Biden to win. That would be very insulting if they wanted me to win. I don't think so. But I really don't think that you're going to know anything on the evening, anything meaningful or anything real on the evening of November 3rd. I don't think you're going to know anything. You're not going to know what happened. I don't think you'll know 2 weeks later. I don't think you'll know 4 weeks later.
Launching political grenades and real fireworks, President Trump's Republican Party will use next week's convention to ignite its base ahead of the most divisive U.S. election in decades. Rather than go online or seek an alternate venue, President Trump will give his speech from the White House itself, an act of bravado that stretches ethics rules and, while legal, tramples over presidential etiquette. He has justified his choice as the most practical, cost-effective measure after COVID-19 forced the cancellation of Republican plans for a traditional convention of big crowds in North Carolina. First Lady Melania Trump is expected to make remarks from the White House's iconic Rose Garden on Tuesday. Vice President Mike Pence, who is important to bringing right-wing Christian voters to Trump's banner, will give his speech in Baltimore on Wednesday. Eagle News will be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
The plague of wildfires across California has now claimed 6 lives and forced the evacuation orders for more than 100,000 people. Governor Gavin Newsom joined a local briefing with the state's top fire and emergency management officials and emergency responders battling the wildfires across Northern California. The governor had already declared a state of emergency and asked residents to heed the evacuation orders. Take a look.
That number is from Southern California. The challenge that we're facing here in the state is now disproportionately impacting Northern California. And that is because of close to 12,000 lightning strikes that we experienced over a 72-hour period. Just a day ago, I announced that we are struggling to address the needs of suppressing some 376 fires in this state. That number has grown to about 560 fires in the state of California. You had a lot of sleeper fires. This we anticipated as the smoke cleared, as our reconnaissance efforts increased, as we compared and contrast the federal efforts with the local and state efforts. That new number represents 560 active fires that we are addressing, trying to suppress here in California. The larger fires, the LNU fire that we briefed you here this morning, this fire complex, what we refer to as lightning complex, is one of many lightning complex fires that we are addressing here in Northern California. The CZU complex and the SCU complex. The SCU complex in Santa Clara right now is about 10% contained. The reason I mark these two in points of contrast, 7% contained here, 10% contained down there, is these two fires represent two of the top 20 fires, largest fires the state of California has had to battle in recent memory, arguably in modern recorded history. These lightning strikes came exact week that we were experiencing some of the hottest temperatures ever recorded in human history. 130-degree temperatures in the southern part of the state of California. Arguably, still an open question, maybe the hottest modern recorded temperature in the history of the world. That's a remarkable statement of fact also a statement of fact that the heat dome that we experienced over the course of last week has not only impacted the state of California, it's impacted the entire western United States. As a consequence of that, and it's an important point, as a consequence of that heat dome impacting the western United States, fire conditions have increased in other states. We've also reached out across the border into Canada for resources and support. And many of you up here recall, it was 2017, the support that we were provided and the support we provided in turn of some of the best wildfire firefighters in the world from Australia. We also have requests out for that talent. Not naive by any stretch how deadly this moment is and why it is essential, as the message has been amply referenced over and over. I'll extend it one more time, that you heed the emergency notices and the evacuation orders. You take them seriously. 119,000 people so far have, because 771,000 acres has already been burned in the state of California, the equivalent to the size of the state of Rhode Island. We simply haven't seen anything like this in many, many years. Please take seriously those emergency evacuation orders.
Now, 6 deaths have been linked to the fires, including 3 people who were found in a burned-down house in a rural area of Napa County and who have not yet been identified. A man in Solano County was also found dead on Thursday, and a helicopter pilot died in a crash while on a water-dropping mission in Fresno County on Wednesday. Now, the smoke from the fires is also worsening an already oppressive heat wave and making the air unhealthy across Northern California. One of the largest group of fires, dubbed the LNU Lightning Complex, has scorched nearly 220,000 acres, burned nearly 500 structures, and forced the evacuation of tens of thousands of people. By midday Friday, the fire, which erupted on Monday and is now the 10th largest in the state's history, was just 7% contained. Some of the fires in that complex threatened wineries in the famed Napa and Sonoma regions, which are still reeling from similar deadly blazes in recent years. Officials said 5 deaths have been linked to the latest fires ignited by, or 6 deaths, rather, updated, ignited by more than 12,000 lightning strikes. 4 bodies were recovered on Thursday, including 3 from a burned house in a rural area of Napa County. Now, fire officials said lightning strikes had ignited 560 fires in the past week, the largest of which are the LNU, the SCU, and CZU complex fires in the Bay Area. Daniel Berlin, CAL FIRE's Assistant Deputy Director, said although firefighters had made progress in the last 24 hours, ongoing triple-digit temperatures and bone-dry conditions were not helping. He added that although temperatures were expected to cool slightly at the weekend, there is the potential of more dry lightning as early as Sunday evening. At the same time, the electrical grid has struggled to keep up with demand, and the coronavirus threatened illness in evacuation centers. An air ambulance took off from the Siberian city of Omsk on Saturday, carrying Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, which have arrived in the Germany treatment center. Navalny is suspected treatment of a suspected poisoning after a day-long standoff over his medical evacuation. Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny arrived in a stable condition for medical treatment in Germany. After appeals by his team that included his wife writing directly to President Vladimir Putin. The 44-year-old lawyer and anti-corruption campaigner, one of President Putin's fiercest critics, fell into a coma after becoming suddenly ill on a plane to Moscow that had made an emergency landing in Omsk. His aides say they believe he was poisoned, apparently by a cup of tea at the airport, and blamed President Putin, though Russian doctors said tests showed no trace of any poison. Doctors treating him in Omsk had refused to let Navalny leave, but reversed course after his family and staff demanded he be allowed to travel to Germany. The plane, chartered by the German NGO Cinema for Peace, took off at around 8 a.m. local time to fly Navalny to Berlin's Charité Hospital for treatment. It was expected to land at Berlin at Schoenfeld Airport at 9:24 local time, which it did. Navalny's wife, Yulia, posted a picture on Instagram of him being lifted into the plane onto a covered stretcher and thanked the supporters for their persistence. She told journalists that she wanted Navalny to be in an independent hospital whose doctors we trust. Navalny lost consciousness shortly after his plane took off on Thursday from Tomsk in Siberia, where he was working to support opposition candidates ahead of regional elections next month. Now, the Russian doctors treating opposition figure Alexei Navalny for suspected poisoning agreed that he could be evacuated after his family and aides battled for him to be taken to Germany. Let's take a look.
Окончательно были исключены диагноз отравления на основании химико-токсикологической экспертизы. Пригласили их на консилиум в больницу. Они к нам приехали, посмотрели нашего пациента, посмотрели его состояние, посмотрели то лечение, которое мы проводим, полностью остались удовлетворены всем увиденным, согласились с нашим диагнозом. Бригада посчитала пациента транспортабельным, бригада посчитала его возможным перевозку. Они гарантировали, что они его довезут до указанного места назначения, то есть там, в Берлин, как мы понимаем, да, мы ждем сейчас документов подтверждающих стороны.
In other news, more than 3 million people face hunger in Burkina Faso, a drought-stricken West African country plagued by jihadist violence, United Nations agency said on Friday. The number of people facing food insecurity has risen by more than 50% since March, as the coronavirus epidemic has exacerbated other countries in the country, according to the World Food Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in a joint statement. Burkina Faso is one of the world's poorest countries, and a jihadist insurgency has killed more than 1,100 people in 5 years and forced nearly 1 million people from their homes. WFP estimates that $51 million is urgently needed to respond to the growing needs in the country. The Sahel region of Burkina Faso has been facing recurrent drought for several years. Following months of mass protests, soldiers have seized power in Mali, arresting President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita and forcing him to resign on national television, sending shockwaves through West Africa. And they've promised new elections and a swift return to civilian rule. But the international community has unanimously condemned the coup, and there are questions over what these developments mean for the fight against militant Islamist attacks in the Sahel region. Take a look.
The coup that was no surprise. Mali is under military rule. Colonel Assimi Goïta has declared himself the head of the junta that deposed President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita this week.
We can't afford any more mistakes. With this intervention, we have put the country first, Mali first. That is why we have assured our support and told them to start working, because we no longer have the right to make mistakes.
For months, Keita had resisted mass protests against his government, giving few concessions. He even pressed ahead with controversial parliamentary elections. On Tuesday, rebel soldiers arrested Keita and his Prime Minister Boubou Cissé, driving the pair to a military base on the outskirts of Bamako, which they'd seized that morning. Late into the night, Keita announced his resignation on national television.
Vous dire ma décision de quitter mes fonctions.
To tell you my decision to resign from my functions, all my functions from this moment on, and with all the legal consequences, the dissolution of the National Assembly and that of the government.
Et celle du gouvernement. De conclure que cela devait se terminer par leur intervention.
If today it pleased some elements of our armed forces to conclude that it should end with their intervention, do I really have a choice? I submit to it because I do not wish any blood to be shed to keep me in power.
Pour mon maintien aux affaires.
The new military leaders briefly closed Mali's borders and announced a nighttime curfew. They pledged to hold new elections soon. In the meantime, a transitional president would be appointed, either from civilian or military ranks.
Civil society and political social movements are invited to join us to create together the best conditions for a civil political transition, leading to credible general elections for the exercise of democracy through a roadmap that will lay the foundations for a new Mali.
On home soil, jubilant scenes on the streets of the capital Bamako suggested popular support for the overthrow of the president.
The whole of Mali has been liberated by a republican force. The Malian people support them from above and from below. We are really very, very happy. There is no education, there is no health, there is no security. Everything has been told to the man. He does not want to listen to the people.
The prominent opposition movement, the M5 RFP, which has been driving mass anti-government protests, said it would work with the junta.
The military are Malians. They are patriots who have only supported this democratic, republican, secular struggle of the M5 RFP, which was carried out by the sovereign people of Mali. So this is only the culmination of a process that was set in motion by the people of Mali.
Coup leaders also met with the ruling coalition, who, while condemning the overthrow, were resigned to a new order.
Nous avons à l'unanimité en tant qu'acteurs politiques démocrates et républicains.
We have said unanimously, as political, democratic and republican actors, that we condemn any seizure of power by force of arms, as Republicans and Democrats. However, what's done is done, and it's the country that's calling us.
C'est le pays qui nous appelle.
But the international community has unanimously condemned the coup. Regional Bloc, the Economic Community of West African States, will send a delegation to Mali and has called for Keita to be restored to power. Meanwhile, the African Union has suspended Mali. The UN Security Council has demanded a return to constitutional order. However, restoring the previous constitutional order will be a difficult task. On Friday, thousands of people demonstrated in Bamako, celebrating the coup.
Eagle News will be right back.
Si Faith Cuneta, abangan niyo po ako sa Himig ng Lahi ngayong linggo alas 8 ng gabi dito lamang sa Net 25.
Ikaw lang ang buhay ko. Ikaw lamang mahal ko.
And we're back in NBA action. The defending champions Toronto Raptors pummeled the Brooklyn Nets while the Boston Celtics had to claw past a determined Philadelphia on Friday, both taking commanding 3-0 series leads in the NBA playoffs. Take a look. Pascal Siakam scored 26 points, pulled down 8 rebounds, and handed out 5 assists to lead the Raptors to a 117-92 victory over the Nets. Toronto connected on 50.5% of their shots from the field and 47.8% from three-point range. Kyle Lowry came up just short of a triple-digit with 11 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 assists for a Raptors team that can clinch a second-round berth in Game 4 on Sunday. Tyler Johnson led the Nets with 23 points. Caris LeVert added 15, and Chris Shuzak chipped in 14 off the bench. But as in Toronto's Game 1 blowout win, Brooklyn never led. And the Celtics are also in control against the 76ers, although they had to battle a struggling but determined Philadelphia side to close out a 102-94 victory. Kemba Walker scored 24 points and Jaylen Brown added 21 as the Celtics withstood a 30-point, 13-rebound performance from Philadelphia. Big man Joel Embiid in the NBA's quarantine bubble in Orlando, Florida. Josh Richardson and Shake Milton added 17 points apiece, and Tobias Harris scored 15 with 15 rebounds for Philadelphia, who connected on just 29.5% of their shots from the floor but kept themselves in it with hustle. The Sixers out-rebounded the Celtics 57-45 and scored 20 second-chance points to Boston's 9. Jason Tatum added 15 points for Boston after averaging 32.5 over the first two games. He was limited by early foul trouble that saw him sit out all of the second quarter. And finally in our news, the humble manhole cover might not seem like much of a blank canvas, but one Japanese city is reimagining the possibilities with illuminated versions featuring anime characters. Take a look.
夜これが光るマンホールっていうのは聞いたことなかったですし、今日来るまではどのような映像で見れるかっていうのは分かってなかったんですけども、思った以上にやっぱり光ってたっていうのと、あと意外とマンホールを歩いてる時っていうのはどこにマンホールがあるのかって分からないんですね。かなり探すのに苦労するんですけども、これだともう遠くからもあそこに光ってるなっていうのが分かるので、探す側もやっぱりすごく助かるなというのはありますね。はい。
In time of physical and emotional distance, we give importance to the unsung service delivered by our frontliners, our news correspondents positioned all over the world. Without them, we would not have the eagle-eye focus on the facts of this pandemic and its continuing repercussions on our lives. To our international correspondents, thank you for staying in touch with our viewers. Stay safe, protect yourselves and others. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.